As many of you know, Princes of Darkness takes place in the World of Darkness, which is a horror dark fantasy role-playing setting with a focus on paranormal creatures, primarily vampires. It's existed since 1991 with various offshoots from television, comics, to officially sponsored video games such as Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which is considered a cult classic. With Princes of Darkness, we have an interesting crossroad between officially sanctioned media, being that Paradox Interactive, who owns Crusader Kings 3, has owned White Wolf Publishing, the creator of World of Darkness, since 2015, but also not because, well, it's a mod for an unrelated game that just happens to be under the same parent company. But Princes of Darkness, officially sanctioned or no, is a hugely popular mod with, at the time of making this video, over 160,000 subscribers on the Steam Workshop and its own wiki, detailing various aspects of the mod's mechanics and characters. Yet when scrolling through the wiki and looking within the mod itself, I found the description for these vampire clans, of which there are 13, somewhat lacking. Since the mod primarily focuses on the Dark Ages facet of the setting, or rather the transition between the Dark Ages and the present setting, which begins around the year 1230, I'm going to talk about the Dark Age clans and hope that feels right for everybody. That is what's listed on the main bookmark, so I think that should be correct. Those 13 clans are the Assamites, or the Banu Haqim, the Brujah, the Cappadocians, the Lasombra, the Followers of Set, or the Setites, the Gangrel, the Malkavians, the Nosferatu, the Ravnos, the Toreador, the Tremere, the Samish, and the Ventru. Now, in the modern setting, there are some major differences between the 13 clans, but I won't talk about those because they don't necessarily matter to the context of this video, but just know that in the modern setting, like things like the Followers of Set are called like the Ministry, and the Cappadocians and Giovanni have fused into something known as the Hakata, and I can explain that kind of briefly when we get there. Also, given the length of this script and to make sure I spread out my content a little bit, I'll be splitting the list in half alphabetically, meaning part 1 will discuss 7 of the 13 clans, from the Assamites, or the Banu Haqim, to the Malkavians, with part 2 covering the Nosferatu to the Ventru 1 week later. With that out of the way, let's begin with the Banu Haqim. One of the more independently focused clans, the Banu Haqim are based out of their hidden fortress of Alamut, and are believed by other clans to be assassins and hunters of other vampires, or Diablerists. Diablerists basically being somebody that eats other vampires. While this is true to a degree due to a curse put upon them, they are also warriors, scholars, and sorcerers who seek to distance themselves from the eternal struggle for power, or jihad, between the antediluvians, or the founders of the 13 original clans, and the Methuselah, who are basically 4th or 5th generation elders of those clans, who sometimes, although not every time, killed their sires. It's very complicated. Within the Dark Ages, the Banu Haqim was split between those who followed Islam and those who did not. Like, some of them followed Zoroastrianism for a little while, other things. But they came back together to defeat a rising power in the demon-worshipping Bali. Though the Bali, before they were defeated, cursed much of the Haqim with a hunger for other vampiric blood, hence the Diablerism that they have. Most warriors, one of the castes within the clan, and many of the sorcerers and scholars still suffer from this curse. Today, much of the clan is Muslim and fights against encroaching Western vampires as they enter into the Middle East thanks to the Crusades. Therefore, the restoration of their power in the region and the expulsion of these Western powers are their chief concern. Though despite a common enemy, there are many sects within the house itself, and in-game there is even a struggle called a House Divided over who will rule their ancient seat of Persia, founded by Hakim, who was himself a 3rd generation antediluvian. For number 2, we have the Brujah, one of the 13 original clans. The Brujah come from either Brujah or the Canaanite Troili the Elder, I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right, who was themselves the progeny of Brujah the Antediluvian, but later consumed them, although some sources say this is not correct. This divide between the two sources is naturally a large point of contention within the Brujah, as those who believe themselves descended from the original progenitor, or Brujah, refer to themselves as true Brujah and view everyone else as usurpers of their name and clan. However, these true Brujah are much more limited in number because, well, their original progenitor is dead, and unlike their cousins, are very dispassionate and cold to a point that they almost lack any emotion at all. The so-called false Brujah are by contrast much more numerous and what you would probably consider to be Brujah in most circumstances. They're known for their passion and rage, as well as their reverence of the body and mind and something known as entelechy. Because of their passion, they are often charismatic leaders and support causes they deem worthy, or are stubborn isolationists who believe in their own self-actualization. It really depends on the individual. Because individualism is a highly valued trait to the Brujah, as they seek what they perceive as perfection, whether that be through great physical or societal change, or personal reflection and study. During the Dark Ages, the Brujah are a fearsome clan of warrior scholars who seek to master both their bodies and minds through the entelechy, by competing in bouts of strength and intellect represented in-game via a sort of tournament known as the Brujah Panegyra. They are found all over Europe, however, given their relationship to Greece and Carthage, they have a fairly negative view of Rome and her rulers. In fact, in-game, the false Brujah have the option of founding Carthage once again, in almost direct opposition to Rome, while the true Brujah, by contrast, get a decision to either have the false Brujah convert, or you go to war against them, which is kind of cool. At number 3, we have the Cappadocians. Now, this is an interesting clan because in the modern world, they don't really exist, having been usurped and purged by the Giovanni clan, with their remnants joining together to form the Hakata clan. Cappadocians were founded by Cappadocius, one of the more active antediluvians in the world, and I say that because he's, actually around for a lot of their history. They're known as scholars with a particular interest in death and the soul, but are not known to interfere very much with the world at large. They often partner with the Ventru as stewards and aides in order to acquire more security to pursue their studies. The Ventru are kind of like a clan that values honor and sort of like being collaborative above all else, so that kind of makes sense for them. Likewise, because of their almost monastic ways, Cappadocians are often found amongst the clergy as monks or priests, and are often even ardent believers of Christ themselves, which is kind of interesting. Oddly enough, they were one of the largest clans of the Dark Ages, which Cappadocius, ever involved in his own studies and plans, didn't actually notice until a mortal told him. He followed this with a series of purges lest the world become too aware of their presence before going back to whatever he was doing. Given their upcoming fate and the existence of the one who will bring it about, patriarch of the necromantic house Giovanni Augustus, child of Cappadocius, and their relative lack of interest in outside affairs, players will likely notice that their decisions are more focused on knowledge and the collection of various artifact books and cities of importance. You can also, as House Giovanni, begin the purge of the Cappadocians early, though the diablerizing of Cappadocius by Giovanni does not happen in lore until about 1444. Might makes right. That's basically the key mantra of the Lasombra, and whether that means they or a puppet sit on the throne, it matters little so long as they can achieve their own ends. Lasombra value power and the acquisition of it above basically all else, and will backstab, scheme, and betray anyone in order to achieve that end. This methodology often puts them almost at direct odds with the Ventru, who we just talked about that value honor and kindness among their kin. As such, they despise one another and often work in parallel for control of the same places, with the Lasombra controlling the church and the Ventru the state. But spirituality, as you can likely imagine, is but a tool to be used by the Lasombra for their own ends. They don't actually care about it. Beyond these things, Lasombra value elegance, be that in dress or oration, and are led in the Dark Ages by their Methuselah Montano, who rules the Sea of Shadows across the Mediterranean. Because of their use of the church, regardless of creed, many Lasombra are often at odds with one another, with the Shadow Reconquista being a good example in-game of this, as the Islamic and Catholic supporting Lasombra battle each other for dominance in the Iberian Peninsula. Number 5, the followers of Set. Setites believe that, not surprisingly, they were created by the Egyptian god Set, who in this setting is a third-generation antediluvian vampire and rival of his brother Osiris, who is himself a fourth-generation Methuselah. They believe Set will return to consume the world, with the most adamant of worshippers actively working towards his resurrection, although it is unclear if he is dead or in torpor, which is a kind of long sleep. Regardless, Setites, who are naturally most populous in Egypt, worked independent of the other vampire clans and refer to themselves as the Children of Rebellion. Much like the Lasombra, the Setites have only one true aim, which is corruption. They seek to destroy whatever is good, beautiful, or safe in both kindred and mortal society. They use any weapon at their disposal, be it vice, power, money, or sex, to achieve their ends, and are masters of manipulation and temptation. Most believe, however, that this corruption is just a step to liberation of the soul, which they perceive as trapped or jailed within the body by the gods. Through their debauchery and corruption, they seek to free themselves of all spiritual restraints and achieve a sort of absolute power, or like a weird, corrupted nirvana. Although in game and in lore around this time there is a growing sect of Setites known as the Decadents who believe in corruption for its own sake and have spread throughout Europe following the sack of Constantinople in 1204. These Decadents have been subsequently banned from Egypt by the Hierophants, or traditional Setites, for their rudderless corruption views. Likewise, they have a decision in game called the Serpent's Embrace, which allows them to secure their traditional borders and basically spread their influence wider. They also have an option, if I'm remembering correctly, to secure cooperation between the sects, I guess you would call it. Number 6, the Gangrel. One of the 13 original clans founded by the supposed child of Lilith, Enoia. Gangrel are the wildest of the vampire clans and prefer to live nomadically or in the wild in comparison to their cousins. They are the closest to the aspect of the beast or the inner predator that controls a vampire's mind, and because of this, Gangrel are often the most feral and predatory of the kindred, and given their bestial and nomadic ways, the least social of the Canaanites. Indeed, beyond being fierce warriors valid for their prowess in battle, most kindred avoid working with them at all, as their aggressive, territorial, and possessive nature make them almost impossible to reason with. But beyond this animalistic rage and tendency, they are also known to be great storytellers within their own circles, spreading legends down orally, with those who keep such tales being highly valued within their societies. In line with this, Gangrel value honesty in their dealings and words, with those being able to keep their oaths likewise revered. Many Gangrel are associated with the Norse pantheon, and if you imagine them as sort of a bestial Viking vampire, that wouldn't be too far off, although this is a bit of a simplification, as those outside of the Nordic lands have different decisions, mostly focused on these nomadic and pagan ends, but it's a good baseline. During the Dark Ages, the Gangrel are mostly just wandering around looking for far-off woods to conquer, but are having an increasingly difficult time as the growing dominance of Christianity within Europe and the Islamic Middle East make it difficult for them to blend in with non-pagan humans. And finally, we have the Malkavians. They're crazy. That's probably the best thing you need to know. And they're known for their insanity and power over the mind, which was passed down to them through their progenitor, Malkav. Malkavians are known primarily as seers and oracles, using their ability to see far through the web of space and time and pulling something out of it. They are notorious pranksters as well, whose jokes often range from innocent to sadistic. Yet despite this seemingly non-serious nature, they are one of the longest lived of the vampiric world and have oscillated from positions of high authority to obscurity since their inception. During the Dark Ages though, they kind of suffered from the fall of Rome, where they worked as oracles. And although they actually enjoyed this, they didn't really care. They thought the chaos was cool. That was until they founded Ordo, or secret societies dedicated to esoteric covenants who aim to use their madness to predict the future and in some cases achieve a sort of maddened enlightenment. As is probably obvious, Malkavians are generally less interested in goals than other vampiric clans and are difficult for other clans to understand as well. They have a decision in the mod known as the Little Prank, which is a nod to the in-lore event known as the Great Prank. In the mod, the Little Prank is kind of a joke where you're not really sure what it does. They're just doing a ritual to do a big thing in Bohemia or Jerusalem, or they're not really sure. They're just gonna do something. Important stuff is coming. That's what it says. I really love the Malkavians. They're probably one of my favorite ones just because they're so out there. But that's gonna be it for this one. That ends the part 1 of our 13 clan overview video. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I would expect the next one around the same time next week. So if this is a Monday, then it'll be out on a Monday. That one will cover the other 6 or maybe 7 if I decide to add one that's not technically in the 13, but probably should be talked about. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't do a lot of lore videos anymore, but if you did enjoy this, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any corrections for anything I said, which I'm sure there's probably something that I said was wrong, please leave that in a comment as well. But as always, I'm Soul. This has been a Princess of Darkness video, and I will happily see you in the next one.